Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, and today we're going to be talking about 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez. This book has been a long time coming. I know I say that for many books, but this book stands alone in that regard. I have, of course, known about this book for many years, have been meaning to read it or any of Garcia Marquez's books. And yeah, there's no time like the present, so I figured, what the heck, might as well read it, and I did, and boy, am I glad I did. Yeah, I'll just get this off the bat, this was a great novel, but just in general, I just posted a review of By Night in Chile by Roberto Bolaño, and I guess maybe it's part of my interest in Bolaño, but also greater than that, my intake of world literature, I don't think is as good as it should be. I'm very much so. Most of the authors I read are, British or American in origin, and there are great authors all throughout the world, and but in particular, one I guess subsect or subgenre of world literature that has interested me and intrigued me for quite some time is the Latin American boom. A kind of a period of time, mainly within the 60s, where four authors in particular published novels and became more widely known internationally. Some might view it as the moment where the international community kind of recognized the power, the immediacy, and the just raw literary talent of a number of writers from Latin America. So Garcia Marquez is one of them. 100 Years of Solitude. This is, I know, considered one of the eminent works of the Latin American boom. A couple others, which hopefully I will review on this channel before too long. I think Julio Cortázar's novel Hopscotch, Carlos Fuentes' The Death of Artemio Cruz, and the fourth author, who's actually the last living, he's still alive, Peruvian author, Mario Vargas Llosa. The novel that I think he published around the time was the Time of the Hero. A novel of his that I have, though, is Conversations in the Cathedral. So if I review one before too long, that's going to be the Vargas Llosa novel that I will read and review. But I think the influence of 100 Years of Solitude. God, I think that the Disney movie Encanto, I heard, was inspired by it. Just the wholesale idea of magical realism, I think, as we understand it, certainly the ties of magical realism as it relates to, aspects of Latin American culture, it's kind of bled through in that regard, at least as I have seen it, as I can understand from my point of view, from my perspective. And I think it speaks for itself, the fact that this novel, I think it's sold tens of millions of copies worldwide, dozens and dozens of languages, I'm sure. And Garcia Marquez, of course, I think in 1982, yes, looking on the back of the book here, yes, 1982, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. So yeah, I was watching, in kind of the ancillary stuff I do when I read a novel and I read a little bit about it, or a little bit around it and the novelist, is there was an interview with Isabel Allende, who's also an eminent Latin American novelist, and she was kind of talking about 100 Years of Solitude as the book that told the story of her life, but that, and they were just kind of going on about the eminent influence of Garcia Marquez as, in some respect, as the one who opened the door for this, for this region, in a literary sense. But of course, it wasn't just him. There were many others. The four names that I had mentioned as kind of the figureheads of the Latin American boom, as the biggest part of it. And so and of course there's Borges, who was kind of preceded all of them. So going into this, I knew I'd heard some aspects of the plot. A novel that's been around for almost 60 years. You're gonna hear aspects of it. But I think what I want to talk about most, and just kind of, I guess, go off about, are just the impressions I got from the themes of the work, or at least my impression of what Garcia Marquez was trying to go for this, what he was trying to tackle, because so much happens within this plot-wise. It's the way that he tells this story, it will turn a lot of people off. For English readers, English language readers like myself, there might be some aspects of it that might have gotten lost in translation, and that's not a knock. I loved the narrative tone and the style of this novel, but the way that it's told, which is, it just kind of goes on and on and on and on and on with this happened, this happened, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. I don't think that's a knock to this. I mean, it's telling 100 years of history of the Buendia family, of this town of Macondo, and it does it in a way that it makes sense. And when you get to the end of this book, it makes sense that everything is just kind of told, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And where there are the moments of clarity and levity for these characters. And I think, I read this over the course of the past couple of days. I read it in maybe 3 sittings. And this is no small novel. This is about, a solid 400 pages here. And I was just absolutely struck by I guess I can call it the power in momentum, the power of never stopping, because this novel just on and on and on and on and on, without having a lot of time to build scenes, having it be more of this omniscient after the fact narrator kind of spilling it all back works. Because Garcia Marquez, he's not telling the story. He's telling the story of Colombia, perhaps the story of not just of Latin America, but the story of the world as a whole. And he does so in a way that is so profound. And there's a quote on the back of the book here from William Kennedy, who I think is the same William Kennedy who's the author of Ironweed. And the William Kennedy quote says, 100 Years of Solitude is the first piece of literature since the Book of Genesis that should be required reading for the entire human race. Mr. Garcia Marquez has done nothing less than to create in the reader a sense of all that is profound, meaningful, and meaningless in life. And there's a lot of truth to that, because the Buendia family is the human family. And especially, the pains of characters like Ursula, who outlives most of her family and is trying to almost perfect the legacy and to have the control over it. And when Macondo, I think of him like the patriarch of the family, and so many of the characters intentionally have either the same names or similar names. I'm just going to look at the family tree here just so I get it right. Jose Arcadio Buendia. So I'll say Buendia, Jose Arcadio, I'll say the patriarch. So as the patriarch founds Macondo, but he's obsessed, and there are these interruptions or these intersections that this family, that the town of Macondo gets with these gypsies who hold information and start to almost whittle away the secret of the world. And it's interesting with William Kennedy, comparing this to the Book of Genesis in terms of it being this kind of huge panoramic history, but it's almost like this is the history of the Garden of Eden. And there's both the goodness and the darkness all mixed into one. And there is the thirst of knowledge, kind of, if you go back to a sense of a biblical illusion, the fall of man, kind of that desire of all knowledge of the nature of good and evil. There is that here, and there's the preoccupation in the just incessant obsession, especially with the male members of the family, the Aurelianos and the Arcadios. It's almost heartbreaking in a sense, because you just hear them about them when they're kids, and they're a little bit curious, and when it starts in a very innocuous sense of the patriarch of Jose Arcadio showing his son Aureliano ice, and they've never seen ice before, and they're so mystified by it, and it's like almost like the secret of the world has been unveiled to them, that there are things within this world that they cannot grasp, that is just entering. But something as innocuous as just seeing ice for the first time, it's almost like it leads them down off this path, because you're thinking about the legacy of Aureliano and how he becomes this kind of, this isn't really spoiling it because it's evident from the beginning, he kind of becomes a despotic tyrant and like a warmonger and a sad old man, but he's this curious kid. And the obsessions of Jose Arcadio, and just on and on and on, and he's trying to, and they're always trying to translate these scrolls, and he has this treasure that people think is buried, and I don't know how it's so hard almost to review this book. It's great, it's something that I would hesitate to give a 5 out of 5 or something like that. Certainly it's a solid 4 out of 5, but so much of it is, you can create this sanctuary, you can create this home for your family. You might have these lofty expectations. You might want to understand what the secret to it all is. There's magic at play in the story. Obviously, it's known for that. There are plenty of magical elements, and it's not necessarily like as these characters go out into the outer world that they get corrupted, but that's kind of true. But it's bringing in the restlessness that a place like Macondo can create. It's almost like this purity that cannot last, because for so long within this town, they kind of pride themselves that there's no violence. There's, Jose Arcadio says, we will all die natural deaths, or even though we know that many of the characters in this book do not meet what we would consider natural ends. Perhaps, maybe these are all really natural ends. Every end is a natural end, maybe. It's just, it'll take me a while to really sift through this and really get a good perspectives on things. So I apologize for that if this isn't like the clearest and most articulate review I've ever done, because you know it's kind of like you're seeing the whole of human history played out in front of you. There's always the hope that your children will be perhaps better than you are, that they will understand more of the world, but it's almost at the cost of understanding more of the world is that they become perhaps more corrupted, more obsessive, that you can never get away from that. It's very fascinating. And I think the character of Arliano, the colonel, who becomes such this big, he becomes such a huge figurehead, and he's, people think that he's, or he at least gets into it, believing that he's fighting for the common man, fighting the good fight, having that knowledge. But what comes with having that knowledge is that he eventually just kind of fesses up as he's signing a treaty and says something to the effect of, we're just fighting for power. We're not really fighting for the common man. We're not fighting for ideologies, for anything like that. We're just fighting for power. We're fighting to fight. It's all about wanting something. That's what's so fascinating about this book. Jose Arcadio, the patriarch, he's obsessed with all of these, whether it be trinkets he creates or things he wants to know and discover. He's always wanting the desire to have more. Ursula, the matriarch of the family, she's the true hero. She's the true hero of the novel, kind of putting up with everybody for so long, but for doing so with such in a forthright manner, in a graceful manner, that I wonder to the effect of in Garcia Marquez's own life, because I wouldn't be surprised if aspects of these characters, while this book is a universal, it is not just, Garcia Marquez saying, let me tell you the story of my childhood. It's not that. Or the story of my family. I mean, in some respects it is, but it's not just that. I wonder what both of the male figures in his family were like, and the female figures, his potentially sisters, aunts, mothers, grandmothers. Because there is a very strict, while certainly the female characters have manipulative tendencies at times in this book, it's a very clear line. It's the men drawn to seeking knowledge that they can probably never attain. And of course we find out what happens at the end when you obtain that knowledge, when you find what you were looking for, and everything kind of goes away, and always seeking power, seeking control. And you get characters like, not even the family characters like Pilar, who becomes a grandmother to many of the figures in the Buendia family, and she's almost this kind of fortune teller. And whether it be some of the earlier characters coming to her and finding a lover in her, or they're just trying to find a fortune teller in her to make sense of things, she is kind of also the stalwart figure. It's kind of Pilar and Ursula. It's almost their story of not only bearing witness, but that they know how things will turn out, unfortunately. And with Ursula, there is this needing almost for it to be pure, recognizing the kind of sanctity and the sanctuary that a place like Macondo is, but wanting the kind of religious component to fuse so readily with it. You know, Ursula wants a priest. She wants one of her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren to become pope. That's just one of her dreams. It's almost said as a joke, but there's sincerity in it. It's almost like that would be validation. And I would have to go back and see when in the book she starts saying, I want this child to be pope. I want them to grow up and be a pope. If that was after Aureliano becoming this kind of despotic colonel. If she sees kind of her sons, her children, what they become, you know, the legacy that they leave behind, very violent, for some of them very short-lived, and then there's almost the insanity of knowledge. I think of again, I have to one of the Arlianos. I think it's maybe Arcadio Segundo, whichever one views the massacre that may or may not have happened, whether or not that's Arcadio Segundo or the final Arliano, because they all have the same name. They all pretty much have the same name, but whichever one it was, and you know, viewing this thing that may or may not have happened, but then people almost being in denial about it, but then that whichever that was, Arcadio or Arliano, and it kind of it consumes him. And there's always something in particular with, I mean, yes, with the female characters, but with the male characters, it's just, there's something that consumes them. With Arliano, he's wanting to still start wars as an old man. I mean, what does that say? Like, oftentimes it's, you know, old men's wars are fought by young men. You know, they're the ones who start it and think it up, and Arliano is doing that to some extent. Wanting knowledge, like the final Arliano, having these almost literary discussions in a bookstore, and wanting kind of validation from the outside as is it Arnada Ursula, the final Ursula, Amaranta Ursula, as she kind of travels back to Macondo and they strike up a relationship with each other, and he's kind of viewing this community that has been, for the better part, destroyed. And I love the ending where he finally is able to translate the gypsies' scrolls, and he finds that it predicted everything. It knew where it would go, because, you know, we as humans are corruptible. There's both, I think, what he is trying to show. I mean, Garcia Marquez kind of portrays it in a very dual male-female type of way. The male side becomes just overrun, becomes compelled by notions of knowledge and war, and it had preoccupation in all of these pursuits of trying to understand things, to control things. And then the women who are the maintainers, the desiring things of peace to some extent, of almost, you know, of simply seeking clarity as well. And how so many of them end up not necessarily being widows, but not marrying at all. And that's another fascinating aspect to it. And that would be, I mean, just as I'm thinking through it now and speaking about it, that's just kind of what I'm riffing off of, what I'm going off of, um, in terms of the general split of the book. But I think he's speaking to the greater quality in humankind, seeking to display it in terms of male and female characters in the book. Not saying that like males in real life are always like this, females in real life are always like this, but just it's the split. It's the natures of man, the natures of mankind, the natures of humankind. The story, that's why like the story of the world is told within this book. You know, we have the natures, the way of nature and the way of grace. I think back to Terrence Malick's the Tree of Life. There's some of that in here as well. That book kind of, or that film kind of has its similar, not magical realism or magical imagery like this book does, but it has that as well. And it's just it's so fascinating to think about. It's a fable in certain respects. It's something that I will come back to. I foresee many times in the future. And I'm glad to have read it. I think my life is enriched by reading this. It's just, you know, when you have the span of all of these lives within this book, when a book seeks to do something like this, but not just tell, you know, the big story of a family, but to perhaps more importantly tell the story of who we all are. And I think I heard that when Garcia Marquez got the idea for 100 Years of Solitude, he was, I believe, driving his family. They were going to go on a family vacation, and the idea came to him. And he turned the car around, he went back, and he started writing. And this, whatever that seed of an idea for this book was, yeah, you only get moments like that once in your lifetime, perhaps, of ideas anybody can get. And he got the idea for this, and he made the most of it. He made the absolute most of it. I mean, this is just, it reminds me of the little I have read of Borges, but he leads off of Borges in such a profound way, in a way that I think Borges could not. I mean, Borges is, I mean, he is inaccessible. He's very, very archaic by design, but Garcia Marquez is not, and perhaps that is his success. I think, I mean, and perhaps Garcia Marquez, with the popular and the critical acclaim that he has achieved with this, perhaps this is the pinnacle. You know, I know a lot of people love this book. A lot of people, this is their favorite book, and I can understand why. And perhaps this is, thinking about it from just a literary perspective, perhaps this is perhaps it is the pinnacle. And again, I wish I could have more in-depth analysis. I tend to read quickly. I don't take notes when I read. I just like to get that first impression. But I will be kind of marking this to return to it. And I'm also looking forward to reading other books by Garcia Marquez. He didn't write many novels in his lifetime. I mean, after the success of this book, right? It's not like he, certainly out of financial necessity, had to write many other books. But, you know, Love in the Time of Cholera, the Autumn of the Patriarch, those are a couple other ones that I would like to read. Now that I know that I like his style, and I'd also be curious if his other books are similar to that, if they're different. So, I mean, this was an extremely long-winded review. I know I didn't do this justice, what it's like to read it. I'm sure I missed a lot. I'm no expert on anything, but yeah, this was just a very fascinating book. I'm glad that I read it. And it's something where there's so much to ponder, because it feels like you're just, the whole of human history is here. The good side, the good-natured side, and the terrible side, reconciling that and knowing that things may not, we cannot change our nature, and we can have these beautiful little sanctuaries. Macondo is a sanctuary, but it's a sanctuary that can have this pure form, but as it grows, as it gets more complex, maybe Macondo is the human soul. I don't know. This is getting too long. We're already past 30 minutes. Good Lord. So, 100 Years of Solitude, or anything by Gabriel García Márquez. If you have read his works, if you have read this book, if you are one of the millions on Goodreads who have rated this, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about not only Garcia Marquez, but other great Latin American authors. I know I've reviewed some Bolaño on this channel. This is my first review of a Garcia Marquez novel. Again, as I said earlier, I intend to review Fuentes and Cortázar and Vargas Llosa, probably Isabel Allende someday in the future. But if there are, international authors just in general, I'm always looking. I'm always curious. I'm always looking. So, anyways, that kind of wraps things up for this video. Apologies for the long-windedness as usual, but hey, so it goes. I will see you guys next time.